Hey everybody, this is Lisa Harper, and you're listening to the Not Ready Yet Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey podcast. This is the show that changes the conversations we have with our loved ones about aging and life decisions. Let's have more honest conversations where we speak the quiet parts out loud. Today's guest is Michael Lewis, Chief Behavioral Officer at Family Legacy Financial Solutions and author of Getting Out of Your Own Way, a book that explores how thinking, emotions, and behaviors can either support or sabotage the decisions we make, especially in late life decisions. Michael's work focuses on the intersection of stress, judgment, and financial decision making, particularly during life's most challenging transitions. Whether it's caring for aging parents, navigating uncertainty, managing family responsibilities, or making a significant financial choice, he examines how sustained pressure can quietly distort our judgment and lead to unintended consequences. Drawing from behavioral finance and real-world case analysis, Michael helps families and professionals understand why smart, well-intentioned people often make poor decisions when stress takes over, and what they can do to make better choices instead. It's a fascinating conversation about human behavior, decision-making, and how to recognize when we may be standing in our own way. I'm so excited for this conversation. Michael, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. I'm really looking forward to diving in on the topics of interest.
The financial conversations with our parents, as our audience is mainly made up of adult kids, having that conversation and seeing things kind of happen, right? Seeing a bit of behavioral changes, maybe some patterns are changing. Maybe there's been a fall, hopefully not more than one. But these little warning signs that start going off and the kids start going, what are we going to do? You know, who lives where? How do we handle this? How do we even start this conversation? So navigating this, it becomes a lot of, responsibility during uncertainty. So what have you seen tell us how you got to this point here, that this became your path and your career?
So the first real incident that affected me goes back to my wife, and she has a sister, and her mother recently had passed away. And the last thing that she said was, "Take care of Arnie, I'm concerned." And at the time, you kind of dismiss it as, yes, she's always been concerned. That's her way. It wasn't necessarily interpreted as a harbinger for things to come. But it turns out it was. And we didn't see it. And really, in the couple of years after she passed, there was really nothing to see. He led a very robust life, continued to go to work in a very high-stress job. But then some warning signs did start to pop up. A little bit of forgetfulness, a little bit of agitation. And from, I guess, the family dynamic, things started to change dramatically. Right. My wife got very much involved with picking the caregiver. She also recognized that there were certain things that needed to be done that were beyond the caregivers that she hired. And while she didn't call herself a caregiver, you could make a very strong case that, and this is probably one of the things that most people don't recognize, is they don't know that they're a caregiver until they're knee deep into it. So she was starting to coordinate doctor's appointments. She was starting to take off time from work and get him to and from doctor's appointments. Pretty soon she gave up her career in order to help her father while he was still working. And what became also apparent to me was and I'm trying to be polite here, and I'll just say the lopsidedness of responsibility, the lack of shared responsibility. So my wife was in it on the day-to-day. Her sister was more just checking in, as it were. And it became quite obvious. And ultimately, as his condition really rapidly deteriorated, arguments over financial started to surface. He wanted to change his will, which I talked him out of it and said, you don't really want to do that. And I basically told him, I go, you don't want that to be a legacy. You don't want to, not that it avoided it completely. And two of them are not very close anymore. They talk on birthdays and things of that nature. But what you see is that finance is an emotional topic in and of itself, and it's also a source of stress in and of itself. So now you're combining stress of money and what it does to you, because Sharon, my wife was leaving. We were both putting, some money into the cost to make sure it was taken care of. So we felt the stress because of the loss of income that, my wife decided we both jointly decided that it was important that she do it, but the consequences were real. And I guess one of the reasons that I ended up getting into this is I never thought about all this until I went through it. And after I went through it, I started thinking about, well, what are the things that I would have done differently? And the answer is absolutely. There were things I would have done differently. And so the practice that, I've come to do, which is helping people with transition, comes from a place of experience, not just theoretical.
Yeah. And I think that's what this conversation is we're talking about the caregiver side of things. And like you say, many people don't identify as one, but there are so many things in this book about making those choices. Do I leave work? How do I manage my life and my family? And at the same time, know that I'm taking care of my loved one. I'll share for those on YouTube, my book, it's got many, many highlights and there's just so much in there. There's decision trees about mapping out thoughts. One thing I love that you said, you're like, this isn't theoretical. It reads like a case file because it needs to. You share a story in there about somebody up against this decision that your wife was in about, do I leave my job to do this? And you said in a very stressed, exhausted mindset, emotionally, time-wise, they made the decision to leave work. What do you want caregivers to know about that career change and decisions?
So what I have found is that many people who decide that they're going to leave their job without doing a bit of analysis to determine how long can they afford to be off, what happens if this is protracted, what's the likelihood of you being able to find work when this is over, is that person is so emotionally attached to the one that they're caring for that they believe that no one else is possibly qualified to do it. And so in their own mind, they've already made the decision that there is no one else I can turn to. Therefore, I must do it on my own, and I need to figure out how I'm going to do it. And there is someone that I've met that specializes in analyzing people's networks. People who think that they don't have other people to rely on. Now, in, I guess, my wife's case, she had someone she thought she could rely on, but it wasn't as good as it could have been. But if people would stop to acknowledge that if I want what's best for my loved one, then I want to get the best care I can get for my loved one, then you have to do things like a self-assessment. As much as you want to do it, what are you capable of doing, right? And most people are sadly not cut out for being a full-blown, all-in, do-it-yourself caregiver because there are just too many things that it requires. It requires culinary skills. You may have to cook for them. You got to clean for them. You may have to clean it up after them. Then you have to run their household, right? So now you're getting into finances. You have to make decisions. You got to make sure liquidity is there to pay the monthly bills. And, you may be good at some things, but very few people are good at everything. And so you got to find those people that you can rely on to help you. Another thing that I have noticed is that most people will default for proximity over skill. Well, what does that mean? My brother is located closer, so I guess he'll take care of the finances. Well, that doesn't make him qualified. It just makes him close by, right? And he may not want to do it. He may not be able to do it. And so before we default into assigning responsibility, I think the conversation has to start with, okay, what kind of help are you prepared to give? And by the way, financial help is just as important as, physical help. So everybody should feel comfortable with what they're going to be able to do, but they also have to be accountable for what they're going to do. Right? If someone says, I'm going to empty out the box and I'm going to go through the mail, you can't wake up 6 weeks later with unpaid bills. You have to be held accountable. And that requires constant communication. Now, that doesn't mean every second of every day, but it certainly doesn't hurt to touch base once a week, maybe twice a week, just to make sure that things are progressing the way they are. That, I think, is really the one takeaway I would like people to understand is there is no good reason to do this on yourself. So don't be afraid to ask for help. And if you don't know where to turn to get help, I would argue that support groups, people like other family members, places of worship, community centers, have people of great experience who can tell you how they managed to get through it. And don't be afraid to ask for help because there's nothing wrong with with admitting that you need help.
You use the word map a lot, and I like that because there's like map out what you have, what your parents have. That also means the paperwork and the documentation in place, who has that power of attorney and the healthcare and the financial and being able to piece this together. I mean, there is so much, and the time to do it is when you have time and there's not a rush, urgent decision to make. I think what everybody says is, I thought there'd be more time. I thought there'd be more time to figure these things out. Like, I thought there'd be more time to find out, what care costs in my area, or what is even available in my area, depending on how urban or not of a place you live, to just start finding those things out. You talked about a family caregiver agreement. What is that? And is it necessary for every family? Why would they want to have that in place?
So as we talked about before, money is a stressor. By all means, it just is a cause of, you have to reveal a lot about yourself when you talk about finances. I'll often joke about my wife, and if she goes to the doctor, she has no problem stripping down butt naked, but talk to the accountant and she is as guarded and defensive as she can be, right? Money is a sensitive issue, and not all family members are equally successful, right? Some are doing extremely well. Some are so consumed with their own personal affairs that they just don't have the bandwidth or, the financial wherewithal to do it. And, trying to treat everybody as equal under, from a financial perspective isn't just right. And it also, in the case of my wife, who decided to leave, it's not only the monies that we put out, but it's also the monies we didn't get back. Right now, some families, they're in agreement and they go, don't worry about it. We'll reimburse you when it's all done. Okay. If you're in a good family situation and everything stays stable, then, sometimes the word is their bond and it's good for it. But God forbid something should happen to that person. Maybe they have an accident, right? And they're no longer able to make that fiscal commitment. Then what do you do? So the family agreement is basically a way of saying, look, here's the responsibilities that I'm going to do as a caregiver. Here's what I expect to do from a time perspective. Here's what I expect to do from a financial perspective. Here's what I'm looking for. And you put it into a formal document. You also made a great point about let's not wait too long to have these conversations, because for some families, when the person in their care is still of sound mind and can make some of these decisions, they may say, look, I'm going to allocate a certain amount of money to whoever's doing the caregiving. You're going to get compensated from this. And it's either set aside in a trust or set aside in a will or however they codify it. But it's coming. The key word there has been codified. It's known in advance, and expectations can be planned around it. And that's what the caregiver agreement is. It is basically family members understanding who's responsible for what, and in cases of compensation. I mean, another good example is I'm having them come move into my house. Okay, that's additional groceries, right? Potential additional cable costs. I mean, think about all the things that come along with it. Where is that coming from, right? You're also, depending on how much space you have, you're going to be encroached upon from just being able to take care of your own privacy and your own well-being. So the family caregiver agreement is designed as a contract, which will stand up in a court of law. And if you are doing things like preparing your elderly for Medicaid, right? Now you have defensible documentation that says, I've been paid for this. I've been paid for this, because you have that 5-year look back where you have to spend down pretty much all your assets and you can't be gifting them away. So it's a way of protecting all family members so that they all have their sense of responsibility. It's a way to prove to interested parties that this arrangement is in place, and so that you can see, and if you've never been through it, when you're trying to qualify for any federal assistance program, no matter what level it is, they require an awful lot of documentation and proof that you adhere to all the qualification standards. So it's not just health, it's means, it's asset tests, things of that nature. So having it will allow them to move monies to you, and having those monies attached and having to give back if you're in Medicaid and you violated some of the qualifications.
Yeah, Medicaid, it's not a plan, it's a framework that you have to work within. For those that don't know where to start, the conversation. And I know it's hard when it's family, but having that agreement in front of you could kind of be like that step by step. This is how we talk about it. What are the expectations here and what are the expectations here? It's a way that it takes it more out of the just ethereal, like we're going to talk about it, to here's things we have to figure out and put it on paper and in writing. It's a legit document. So I think that it also could be used as an anchor to kind of starting some of these hard conversations. How do we piece all of this together and create it with your aligned values as a family, and not letting fear direct it, And one part you did say was that postponing clarity until urgent circumstance, it removes the choice. Like right now you have choice. Like the one thing we can't get back is time. That urgent crisis happens, you're in what's the next decision mode. And you don't have time to research, and you don't have time to get all the information. Like deal with things that you can deal with before the crisis. If we have aging parents with us, I consider it a gift. How do you manage your future when things continue to decline? What Michael does is he brings reflection, things to be thinking about, things to know, things to understand. What else do you want people that are on the fence about leaving their workplace to think about in order to be the caregiver full time?
It's a real significant decision, and it's a decision that should not be made emotionally. It really does require you or someone that you trust to take a step back and really show the numbers and what the impact is. Because there are things that we don't know, which is how long is the event going to last, right? Could be 6 months, could be 10 years. Well, if you're committed to not working or, taking early retirement, you should be checking with, your human resource department and find out what's available to you. You'll find that by the time you go through the analysis, I'm willing to say in more cases than not that when you do the economic analysis, sometimes it is more advantageous to hire somebody and keep working than it is to give up work and do it yourself.
Yeah.
And so the other thing I guess I would add to this is doing nothing, like you said, is a choice. But the one thing that you can be sure of is the more time lapses, the more options shrink or disappear completely. And a good example of that is, families starting out. Long before you have this issue of, you aging yourself, long-term care insurance, the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. Do you not take it now and buy it later? Do you buy it now and make sacrifices sooner, or do you try to prepare and just self-fund for it? Those are all valued and possible options, but isn't it much better when you can consider all three versus I don't have options 1 and 2, now I have to self-fund it because there's no choice there? And if you think about other decisions that, expire over time, God forbid you have somebody who has a sudden stroke and is unable to speak and communicate, right? If you do not have the powers of attorney in place and she cannot communicate and you don't have all the paperwork in there, well, then you have to work within the confines of what is specified and what is recognized by law.
Yeah.
And the law doesn't necessarily work in your favor.
The conversations are not yes, no answers. They could be going on for a year. Your parent may be very reluctant and almost offended that you started to try to talk about something. But I say to people, we are living in a way that has never been experienced before, with people living as long as they are, with the medical technology and things that we know. So if you have a loved one and they're in their 70s, they could be here another 20 years. And so to have that plan, that's a lot of responsibility. These aren't fun conversations. They're not easy conversations. They're difficult. The care for someone today, like how does that translate into the rest of your life, your family's life? We have opportunities to have these talks. Michael, what would be your best practice right now for a family if they're thinking, oh gosh, yeah, we're starting to see signs?
If you're starting to see signs, then trust your gut in that regard. It doesn't take much to have an exam, find out what's true and what's not. look, sometimes we see things and they're not really there, right? I think I gave an example where someone was starting to get forgetful, but he was also under a tremendous amount of pressure, right? And so you don't want to overreact, but you certainly don't want to underreact. I would also suggest that when you're having these conversations, your loved ones, to the extent that they can participate, should be part of the discussion. There's nothing worse than talking about someone when they're in the room and you're treating them like they're not even there. I'm sure they have thoughts about how, they want to transition, for lack of a better word. I also consider things that, when one parent, if it's a parent, dies, that doesn't mean the other one is about to pass away as well. You have to make sure in your planning that you plan for the survivor, right? Because if you don't plan for the survivor, well, that survivor is likely to become a burden on the rest of the family. And the fact that, depending on the age that one passes away, the survivor could still have 10, 12, 15 years, if not more. That's a substantially long time. And if things weren't put in place in terms of retirement or managing the expenses more carefully versus just saying we'll do whatever it takes to make sure he's comfortable. And I know that sounds cold, but you have to realize that life goes on for those who survive, including the caregiver. Right. And because caregivers are likely to have family members and they themselves are going to be living longer too, those decisions that you make about early retirement, leaving your job, even temporarily, are going to have consequences that snowball for your own retirement. So when you're making a decision, and this is the one thing that I'm very adamant about, is aging is not just a parent's problem, it's a family problem. And the only way to deal with it is with a family solution. And you don't make decisions just based on one person's needs or one person's strength of balance sheet or income statement. You have to look at it from a family perspective. I had somebody come in this week to talk about it. And, not in this particular case, the person had two other siblings, weren't nearly as successful. She knows she's going to have to do the lion's share, but she's concerned about her father. Her mother has got a disease. She's just been put into hospice, and they're starting to think about retirement. And I gave them a whole bunch of things to think about that I'm pretty sure they never thought about before. And even though it's a tough message to deliver, I think it's the obligation, certainly my obligation. I'm willing to bet, Lisa, it's yours too, is you may not want to hear it, but you need to hear it.
Yeah. No, you don't want one medical crisis to create this financial burden and instability for everyone. The clarity you have and the peace you can feel from having them, regardless of what the answer is, that's the thing that I want people to get, is that if you don't have them and then something happens, you don't know what their wishes were, you don't know what they even wanted, and then you're making decisions going, oh my gosh, I don't even know if this is right. And especially if we're talking about dementia, they say it's the longest goodbye for a reason. If you have not had those conversations, you're not getting that time back to get that answer, and then you're sitting in a state of, I don't know if I'm doing what they want. So there's so many things that we have the moment to have that clarity, and I want people to take it. It's uncomfortable, but it is an opportunity. I'm sorry, it is. And those family dynamics, sometimes we just have to have them sit at the table with us, and hopefully everybody can, stay level-headed and work things through for the better of everyone. Michael, they're heavy questions. And that's why I think, guys, if you are like, okay, this all sounds great, but really, what do I do? I really do suggest going out and getting Michael's book. And again, it's called Getting Out of Your Own Way. And there's step-by-step questions, the breakdown of understanding different health accounts, the paper trail that you need to have. The thing I love is the questions, the reflection. A lot of things are mapping things out, like build a 9-month cash map. If you're the adult kid that usually takes the lead, and you go get the book and start working through some of these things, and then you can kind of help lead the group, and then always bring in an expert when it gets to that point, because penalties, tax penalties, early withdrawals, those kind of things. I mean, we need to rely on people that know, that stay up to date and understand, and can also see our whole big picture, and not just, again, get one answer for one question that has no context around the rest of whatever else is going on. Michael, is there anything you want to make sure we touch upon today for the audience before we start to close?
Again, it bears repeating, get the help you need and deserve. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to accept it. This is a enormous responsibility that you're taking on with ramifications that can span generations. So there is no reason not to get the help. I will also just want to acknowledge the comment you made about the book. I wrote it not to tell people what to do, but to help them think about what they can or cannot do. So it's not about dispensing advice. It's helping people think through their options that they may not have considered. And I appreciate you highlighting that.
Absolutely. Like you say, we're all individual puzzles and what are those pieces? And then you got to take a look at the whole. But now I really am impressed with it. I truly am. Well, Michael, before we go, I have a ready or not lightning round. Would you like to participate as we wrap things up?
I don't know that I have a choice, but okay.
That's probably accurate. They're easy. It's 3 questions, just your first instinct, no overthinking. So on a home, what is your preference? A front porch or a back deck?
Back deck.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Nice. And then insider language, what's a phrase or a piece of industry jargon that people outside your field wouldn't necessarily understand? And what does it mean?
Ooh, that one actually demands a little bit more thought. I'm going to say what people don't understand or take for granted is the concept of correlation. So what does that mean? When we're building portfolios, the idea is to have assets that are uncorrelated. That helps spread the risk. And so it's not about just picking the right stock, it's getting the right mix. And correlation is a pretty significant factor in helping construct portfolios.
Okay, that's a good one. And then the last question is one thing at 55. If every listener did just one thing at age 55 to make life easier at 75, what would that be?
Work out, take care of yourself physically and mentally.
Okay, that has nothing to do with finances, so you surprised me.
No, it does not, but it's not all about finances.
No, I know.
Sometimes it's just about mental acuity and
I agree.
Having a reason to live to 70. I know that sounds depressing, but a lot of people that I know that went into retirement, they were now forced into a situation where they're with their spouse all the time. It's probably the first time in 40 years that they spent that much time together, and you need to have a purpose, and you need to be physically able. Getting old is not easy.
It's not for the faint of heart.
It is taxing. It is demanding, and so be prepared for that next chapter of your life. Be physically and mentally ready to do whatever it is you choose to do.
Yep. The conversation between health span and lifespan. I always say, how long are you going to live, and then what's the quality of the life within those years. Well, thank you so much. And this will also be on the resource page in the show notes, but how do people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I've provided you the link to that. You can call my office, email me at Michael, Michael, at FamilyLegacyNC like North Carolina.com, or visit our website, which is www.familylegacync.com.
And the book, is that on Amazon?
That is on Amazon.
Okay, great. Well, Michael, thank you so much. Again, guys, the book is Getting Out of Your Own Way by Michael Lewis, and it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you deep diving into the caregiver side of things. I think we're going to come back for a part 2, so stay tuned for part 2 with Michael in the future. So, well, Michael, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. I appreciate the time you took to write the book to help us get out of our own way so that we can help see things more clearly when we're going through these emotional moments, and hopefully help people make decisions that align with their values.
When you make a very quick decision, it is often jaded by your emotions and is often not in the best interest of the people that you're making that decision for.
Yeah. So guys, stay tuned for part 2. And again, Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Lisa, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me on Not Ready Yet, Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey. If something in this episode gave you clarity or the courage to start an important conversation, or offered a new way to look at things, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need the same encouragement. Remember, navigating aging isn't something we have to do alone or in crisis. With love, logic, and the right tools, we can face what's next with confidence and connection. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. It helps others find the show. And just a quick note, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for medical, psychiatric, legal, or other professional advice. Always consult a qualified professional for guidance tailored to your unique situation. This is Lisa Harper, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.